Welcome to ComSpark. Today we are in Cincinnati, Ohio. My name is Bryan Hogan, and I'm with Afidence, and I will be your guest host today. We are here today with James McIntyre, Chief Information Officer at YMCA of Greater Cincinnati. Thank you so much for joining us here today, James.
Thank you for inviting me.
So thanks again for joining us here today, James. So what challenges are you most concerned with in the IT industry?
For me, I think that it's probably trying to strike a balance between innovation and keeping the machine running. So Gartner refers to that as bimodal IT, and you need sort of a different skill set because, like, when I'm working with the servers, that can't fail.
Right.
So I don't want anyone to take any risks, don't do anything sort of special. But if we're not innovating today, we'll be out of business tomorrow by someone who is innovating. And so what we really need to do is we really need to do a bit of a shift where we start working a little bit more with innovation and systems of innovation instead of just basically keeping the machine running. So for me, that's probably the thing that I struggle with on a daily basis. But then security is always there as well.
Right.
And firewalls are great, servers are great, antivirus, but the end users,
Right.
they're always the weakest link, unfortunately. So It's just a constant struggle training them and trying to get them to be smarter than the smart fishers out there who are trying to steal their information.
Yeah, totally understand. It's in the world of server management, right? It's always in the past been no risks. Let's keep these things locked down as much as possible. But in the world of innovation, right, you're taking risks. You're doing more things. And those are great changes for users, right?
Yes.
At the same time, it definitely increases the importance of training and user awareness, especially from a security standpoint.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. So James, as the IT leader, how do you work with the business leaders within your organization so that you understand their priorities and integrate that into IT priorities?
Okay, that's a really good question. For me, I'd like to think I'm a pretty smart guy, but my success or failure doesn't depend upon how smart I am. It depends upon the smartest person in the room. And so the smartest person in the room is everyone, when they're together, all communicating really well. And so for me, I succeed or fail depending upon how careful I listen to the business and how careful I communicate back to them any changes or any things that need to be sort of modified, like we can do this or we can't do that. Also, what I routinely do is, since we're all sort of co-located, if I'm on the way to the kitchen to grab a cup of coffee or something like that, what I'll do is I'll stop by with one of the other C-suite folks and just chat with them and say, is there anything in the offing, anything on the horizon that we need to sort of start looking at? And then what we'll do is we use basic Six Sigma documents for everything. So what I do is I again try and identify all stakeholders, share everything out, and so for me it's a collaborative thing. Now sometimes there will be some compliance issues, and so with that I'll have a heavier hand steering the situation. I'll say these are the issues that we're not allowed to bump up against, but again I'll still chat with them back and forth and so on. So most of it is talking with them a lot, careful listening, and then asking questions about, is there anything out there where technology might be involved? Because a lot of times they'll go most of the way down the track, and there's ways that IT could help them before they get there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes they don't know what they don't know, so if you select questions can bring out some great opportunities where IT can make an impact.
Exactly. And one thing I also try and do is I try not to ever get involved in politics. There's always politics everywhere, and I try to be Switzerland. And so, I mean, I'll stand up for my folks and so on, but generally speaking, I'm there and I just try and say, what's the best thing for the organization? And then once everyone else sees that, everyone sort of seems to get less territorial, and they just sort of say, what can we do for a win for all of us?
Oh, that's great. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So James, as the sophistication of your users from a technology standpoint have increased, how has that impacted how IT serves them, at least as it relates to their functional needs?
That's a really good question. For me, I find that listening to the end users is probably the key thing. And what happens is if you don't, then they develop a lot of shadow IT where they're trying to do their own thing. So a lot of people are there and they just want to use Dropbox because it's easy for them to get everything at home. And so what we do is we say, we notice a lot of people starting to use Dropbox. Why don't we bring it into OneDrive? And so it basically helped us accelerate migration across to OneDrive and SharePoint and so on, and that way we still control all of our data instead of it just being somewhere out in the cloud where it doesn't belong to us. We've also done a lot of things where we're really trying to, it's really influenced our cloud strategy a lot, so that basically we're trying to get out of the data center wherever possible and do everything as X as a service. So software as a service, platform as a service. So we used to have people, what they would do is they would use an old AS400, and they would have all of the data basically just stored on there, including credit card numbers, where they could get them, and so on. And so there was a project that was started probably about 3.5 years ago, and that was basically, I finished that off once I started there, and that was basically moving all of the credit card data out to First Data, who needs to sort of safeguard that, all of our personally identifiable information out to our ERP system, and then all of our HR data, including social security numbers, out to Paycor. So because of that, we don't have any data within our infrastructure that can really be stolen, apart from some spreadsheets and PowerPoints, or those Six Sigma documents that I referred to. But that also puts a greater burden upon us to check the SOC 2 compliance reports and that sort of stuff, to make sure that those people are still trustworthy partners and operating in sort of like standards of their SOC compliance.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So it decreased to some degree the compliance mandates that were on you, but it also increased them relative to making sure you're selecting the right partners to meet your long-term needs.
Exactly. That's correct.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So how would you describe your cloud strategy?
So our cloud strategy is basically to try and get out of the data center, get everything out into the cloud as safely and as quickly as possible. There are certain things that we may keep in-house. So at the moment, we've probably got about 20 servers that what they're doing is they're just linking in with all of the software as a service providers that we have. We'd probably like to eventually get those hosted as well, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to make the finances work for that at the moment. But that's a consideration for this year, as we're talking a lot more about innovation. It's like we can pay a little bit extra here to free up the time for myself and the director of IT, so we can focus a lot more on innovation. And so now it's not becoming hard costs, it's becoming opportunity costs as a consideration. We're also doing everything as mobile first. So we did a complete redesign of the website last year, and what we did was we had everything tested on mobile devices. So we had several different Androids, a couple of iPhones, iPads and some other tablets, and that's where everything was developed. And then we made it fit on the desktops as not as an afterthought, but that was secondary compared to mobile. And we did that because there was, I think, 72% of our traffic was mobile, so we just said, let's develop it mobile first.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense, especially considering your industry and what you do. I would imagine your constituents are always going mobile first.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense.
Yep.
So James, how do you guys measure your customer satisfaction?
One tool that we just recently implemented was called Listen 360. And what it does is it sends out surveys to individuals, and it gathers a net promoter score, and it's got some artificial intelligence built in there where it will flag certain areas that we need to respond to. It allows the branch execs and our membership people to have complete control over all of the different bits and pieces. But for us, we were able to get our net promoter score from when we first started from around the like very low 50s up to sort of the high 60s, low 70s, which is from a net promoter score thing where it can go from minus 100 to plus 100. It's comparable with the net promoter scores and the customer satisfaction to Apple and or Starbucks.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So thank you again so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and your insights today, James. And thank you so much for our listeners. To learn more about us, go to ComSpark.tech. This is Bryan Hogan. Have a great day.